Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and today I am joined by, Curly and Mo, my two brothers from other mothers, my older brother and younger brother, Mr. Brian E. Roach. What's going on, Brian?
I am in self-isolation and hiding from the world.
And are you doing the same, my other brother, the Professor Zach Metkler? What's going on?
Yeah, the only contact I've had with the outside world is my dog at this point. So, day 2 of isolation.
I'm usually isolated as it is, and I think the biggest thing is homeschooling my 6-year-old daughter right now. But other than that, I've been out, but I've been practicing the social distancing thing, and I think some people are just like ignorant of. I don't know. This was the thing I practiced before there was any type of coronavirus or COVID-19 scare or anything like that. I like to keep some space between me and other people, and I think some people still haven't gotten the hint.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah, I think that's true. Some people don't get the hint, but hey, just to be clear, I'm self-isolating not because I have been diagnosed or feel any symptoms. I'm just self-diagnosing because I don't like people.
Or self-isolating, self-diagnosing.
Self-isolating, yeah.
You bring me right back, Brian. You bring me right back to it. Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Excellent Ghostbusters reference.
Yes, the 40 years of darkness, earthquakes and volcanoes and fire and brimstone, and what else did he say? Like seas boiling, whatever. There is no Brian, only Zool. But anyway. Anyway, speaking of mass hysteria and a whole other note, this free agency stuff is kicked off hot and heavy. Sunday morning, at some point, we learned that the NFLPA approved, ratified, whatever you want to call, yes vote for a new collective bargaining agreement, and that opened the floodgates for teams to start doing things and stuff because we got free agency right around the corner. Wednesday at 4 o'clock is when everything becomes official. The legal tampering already began, and they had a deadline on franchise tags. They didn't move anything back, so it was basically as soon as it was like, on your mark, get set, go. And right out the gate, the Steelers, they went, and the big one was Bud Dupree, franchise tag. We know it's going to be north of $16 million. And on the other hand of that, I don't know how much we want to talk specifically about good or bad move. We knew this was, I think everyone's in agreement here, this was a move the Steelers were going to do, or going to at least attempt to do, and then we could talk about the fallout of that as well. You know what, since there's 3 of us, so we aren't talking all over each other, I guess I will just kind of moderate, in the political kind of spectrum here. You guys haven't been given any of the questions ahead of time or anything like that, so we'll shoot from the cuff. But Brian, this was something I'll go with you first. This was something we expected all along.
Absolutely. I mean, they stated from the very get-go that Bud Dupree was a priority, and this move doesn't mean they're not going to continue to try and come to terms for a long-term deal. It just means that they're making sure he's part of the equation for next season. And we've talked about it, and I know there's a group of people out there that think it's a terrible move, and he's a one-year wonder, and I feel like we've debunked that to no end. I'm glad that Bud is still in the fold for one more season at least, and I'm here's hoping that they figure something out to keep him around so he can do a Ramon Foster deal in 11 more seasons.
Yeah, retire as a Steeler. That would be nice. You jumped ahead. I was going to get Zach's thoughts on, because he's clearly one of the guys who were, and this is totally tongue in cheek, that thought this was terrible and the sky is falling, the cats and dogs, everything else, hysteria. I know you're not thinking that, Zach, but I know you're on board with us as well with thinking this is a good move for the team going forward.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I've just established that the people that have their opinions on Bud Dupree just aren't going to change. And the people that love him, love him. The people that hate him are going to continue to hate him. He could put up 20 sacks next season, and they'll somehow find a way to say it was by accident. So I've gone with the mindset that the Steelers did what they needed to do. Whether it was a fluke last year or it wasn't a fluke, he was able to produce opposite of T.J. Watt. You want to keep that defense together, and this at least gives you the opportunity to have him in here for one more year until you see if you can add a body in the draft or work out a long-term deal that's not going to handicap you from being able to sign T.J. Watt long-term the following season either. So it's a move that needed to be done. I'm glad that it happened the way that it is, and that hopefully we don't have the same Le'Veon Bell type of situation. I don't get that vibe. He's going to be making $16 million next year. I don't see him wanting to hold out on that deal. So I think realistically it's good for the team and it's good for the defense, and hopefully something long-term can come of it. But if it doesn't, at least we have 2020 to look forward to.
Big Bud isn't out there creating rap albums and talking about what he wants paid and how he's going to sit out and on jet skis. He's pretty much said that he wants to be a Steeler too. And we'll talk about the guy that we lost, I guess, that would have liked to have been here, but it wasn't in the stars. And I'm going to give it to you first, Zach, because you get all the credit for this. Javon Hargrave, highest paid nose tackle in the NFL right now, and I don't know if we necessarily saw highest paid. I thought dollar signs. You definitely saw this coming from a mile away.
Yeah, people want to undervalue what he did here because of the snaps played, and that was my whole argument against not paying Javon Hargrave to the same Pittsburgh. I would have loved to have seen him stay here, but I knew in my heart of hearts that he was going to get a lot of money, and just the way the Steelers used him, I couldn't rationalize using paying a nose tackle that type of money from the pay the percentage of snaps he was playing. He's playing less than 50% of snaps. He saw an uptick last year because of Stephon Tuitt being out for the year. Otherwise, we would have seen the same trajectory from him. And he's going in a situation now in Philly where realistically as a one tech for them, he's not going to come off the field a terrible amount of time. And he has easily one of the best defensive line units around him. I mean, him and Fletcher Cox are going to destroy up the interior on Philly's defensive line. I'm happy he got paid the money he did. He deserves every nickel of it as far as I'm concerned. The fact that I'm seeing Philly fans upset about it really just kind of ticks me off because I'm like, if you don't want him, we'll take him back. It's fine. I'm happy for him. I'm glad to see he's doing that. He's going to be a force for them. And I'm not surprised that he got the money. People are talking between 12 and 14 million. He got the 13 highest paid in the league. And, you're not going to see anything better from them. His story is pretty awesome. From a no-star, one-star recruit to, a small skull to third-round draft pick, now highest-paid nose tackle. It's a really cool story for him.
Yeah, and, by all means, if it does happen that way and, the Eagles don't want him, just as long as they don't release him, and then the Steelers have to get rid of somebody they signed in order to get a comp pick for him, and then he goes to Baltimore on top of it, which would be pretty nasty. And I'm already hating some of the moves with Baltimore, but, I'm tired of the sky is falling thing. Calais Campbell's still obviously a really great player, but, geez, he's getting up there in age too, so we'll see how that plays out, know what I mean? Brian, we're sad about the J Wobble thing, but there's plenty, like Zach just said here, there's plenty of other guys who could fill this role that are already on the roster, let alone if they don't bring in maybe a veteran guy or draft someone. I mean, you've got for all intents and purposes, someone that kind of fits that mold that's still developing. They drafted last year in Isaiah Buggs. They still have the mountain of a man, Dan McCullers. Tyson Alualu has played at the tackle position as well as spelled Hayward or Tuitt as an end. So all the things that Hargrave was doing, and for the amount of snaps, we're talking like, a nose tackle's on the field maybe 30% of the time, and a traditional base 3-4 with the Steelers. They got enough in the cupboard there to weather this storm, losing like a quality talent like Hargrave.
They do. We knew this was coming. There was no question that somebody was going to give him money that the Steelers simply could not match. They knew it. I think he knew it. There was a little false hope that came out earlier in the week when somebody asked him if he wanted to stay in Pittsburgh, and he said absolutely. But it doesn't, that what you may want and what ends up happening, there's millions of reasons why it doesn't work out that way. And in this case, that was, many, many millions of reasons. All of them, green and with dollar signs on them.
Yeah. And you know what? It's like people are expecting now. Here's the fun deal here. People are expecting the Steelers to be able to sign this and that. Others are like, what are they going to do? They have absolutely no money. And as of this morning, after everything that happened yesterday, I actually wrote an article for the site. Tina already had something that was more pertinent to go out. Mine was about Bud Dupree and making some moves, getting under the cap, make all these things. Because right now they have to figure for $16 million. I'm thinking to myself, if folks want to go out there and look at some of the top, 3-4 outside linebacker contracts that are comparable, I think Zadarius Smith is probably the best case scenario, like with the Steelers, where if with the Packers, most of it's on the back end. With Smith, when it comes to him getting paid, I think he goes up to like $14 million in year 4 of his contract. But last year he was only at like about 7 or 8, and that would be, I would think between 7 and 9 of a cap hit if they can get it that low. And rip up the franchise tag, do a long-term deal, spread out some of the other cash over the life of a 3-4 year deal. That would be ideal, pun intended, for the Steelers. And maybe they could do some other things. But Kevin Colbert and Omar Khan and all of we talk about wizards, and I know we have present company excluded when it comes to Pro Football Focus, but there are some real wizards when it comes to the Steelers, front office and wheeling and dealing and figuring these things out. How many people did they ask to restructure, and how many things did they just do in the last, not even 48 hours, maybe 36 at this point, that got them somewhere in the ballpark of, restructures was in the ballpark of $20 million. And it was like, what, Ben Roethlisberger, I think, Joe Hayden, fill in the blanks for me here, Chris Boswell. Who else did they go to? They went to like 4 or 5 guys and got them to all the redo deals. And basically what that means is that some of the money's converted to bonus, and then the Steelers can spread that out for calculations for salary cap reasons, cap hits, dead cap, et cetera, over the course of several years later. That's why the whole CBA thing was so important, because right now they're telling us that the cap is like about 198. I think the Steelers had $5 million left over from last season, or was it $2 million? Are they at 201 or 203 with what rolls over? Do you guys remember?
I think they got 3, so it'd be like 201, 202, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's something like that, because it's like 198 and change or something is the official cap for everyone. And then, you have money that carries over. You have so much you have to spend in a year. There's all these different rules, right? So just, they were up against it already with that before tagging Dupree, so they had to get underneath that. And the restructures got them about 20. The other moves shaved them about 30. It got them to like 35. Now, Joe Reuter, who's been on the show, I didn't save Joe's thing. I got to find this now. He was just talking about it, and he was even talking about with any kind of tenders or whatever, they may still have about 8 left or in the ballpark of that with tendering. Who was it? Filer, Banner, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to think who else it was. I got to go.
Oh, Mike Hilton.
Was it Mike Hilton too? Okay. I'm trying to figure out what they're going to do as far as a tender, Zach. I mean, there's first round tender, second round tender, and then there's original round tender, and all these guys were undrafted free agents, so you can't really do original round tender and expect to get anything back. They would get nothing. I think the only thing they get out of that is that they can match a contract, right?
Yeah, pretty much. So, like, when you look at the first and second round tender, you're dishing money out there. I mean, Banner, you could give an original round one, because I believe Banner was a 5th round pick, if I'm not mistaken. But obviously, Filer and Hilton were both undrafted. But, I mean, you're looking at, you can't give an original round tender for them. The only one I could see getting the money would be Filer giving a first round one. But I don't think anyone's going to give up a second or first round pick for either Filer or Hilton. So, you're playing with Fire there. I think that's where we're going to see not really a high tender priority put on any of those guys. And no offense to Banner, as much as I love him being here, I'm not sure the Steelers are going to want to give up that type of money for him if they don't have full confidence that he could win that right tackle spot. So it kind of puts them in a weird, tricky situation where they could very well put the tender on, a second round tender on a guy like Filer or Hilton and have him play for not a lot of money. But then, Hilton kind of did a similar thing last year with his playing hardball and trying to, wanting to get money. Villanueva's done that and kind of parlayed it into a new contract whenever he was tendered. So it's a really tricky situation for the Steelers and how they want to go about doing that. In a perfect world, some team would go and offer them a boatload of money. The Steelers wouldn't sign it. They get a second-round pick out of it, but I don't envision that happening for any of them. So it's only a difference of a couple $100,000, like $1 million or something like that between the first and second-round tender. So it's really not a huge groundbreaking thing for them. But with the fact that they're all low round / undrafted free agent players, you kind of put in a tricky situation with how to go about using that money on the tender, since you can't give an original round on 2 of them.
Yeah, here we go. I found Joe's tweet. He actually had them tendered both. Let me see, Filer and Hilton. Restricted free agent tenders for second round, original tender for Banner. So yeah, some of that isn't. It's like a little bit of chump change. He was using over the cap to do this too, just like we usually do. And those guys, I was trying to figure this out even on Monday, how they can do a lot of this stuff. And if they don't give out like crazy, these tight end contracts are crazy, like Austin Hooper, and I'm just like banging my head against the desk trying to figure out like some of this. So I don't know what will go on with like a Nick Vannett or something like that, but I think these are the guys you have some control over the contract and bringing them back, and there's only so much they could do this year. You're looking at this thing could explode to 230, 240 million next year, depending on where you read and where the sources are coming from. So, and Joe was talking about they need to allocate about $8 million for restricted free agents. Well, they're going to need some cashola as well to sign any of their rookies that they're going to draft. And should there be any injuries, to get in, bring anybody else over, whether it's signing someone off another practice squad or off the street or anything like that. So I think they're still tight up against it, but there's still like some real crazy voodoo witchcraft that Kevin Colbert and company in the front office have done. Hopefully they could do something with Bud and create a little bit more space. But Brian, like we've been saying, I don't think they're going to be breaking the bank for anything else. Some people are going to see the Bud Dupree news. They're going to be like, how can we do that? We're losing all these players or whatever. It's just, the nonsense or whatever, word vomit they're going to come up with just to complain about Dupree, to complain about money. The same thing with Ben, you know what I mean? They're going to see Ben's cap hit next year, and some people are going to freak. But then you look at somebody like Ryan Tannehill and what some of these guys, Drew Brees getting like $50 million or so for 2 years. It's like, this is just where it's headed, guys. And it's not Amari Cooper 5 years, $100 million. Okay.
No.
It's nothing like that. So I don't expect much more movement. I think they're going to stand pat and everyone else is going to cry and complain. Why didn't they do anything in free agency? And I think the biggest thing right here is just keeping their own guys under within their own house.
Yeah. I mean, that was, when you're up against the cap as much as they were earlier, it's no great surprise that they got to do this kind of manipulation to get to where they want to get, and the priority for them is always keeping their homegrown guys. I think it may have come as a bit of a surprise. Some of the cuts that occurred, especially Mark Barron, I don't think we really saw that one as likely, but it happened. Not that we were terribly surprised, but you got to find a way, and there could be more restructures that occur. What folks out there really need to understand is that all this movement is not designed to open up herds of money so they can go out and bid heavily on a free agent. That's not going to happen. They got to free up enough space to sign their draft picks. They got to free up enough space for Bud, and also to try and keep the other guys. And that's their priority right now is keeping in-house the guys they want to keep.
And not only that, like I said, with Bud Dupree, if they get something else worked out, they'll have that money. Then they can go, in training camp, and let's say they cut it almost in half, and they'll have a little bit of money, and then they can go and extend like Cam Hayward, or they could start doing some deals with maybe a Juju on an extension or something like that. So it's going to be mostly all in house. And Zach has said free agency is stupid. Isn't that your exact quote?
Free agency is stupid. I'm not changing my thought on that.
But explain to everybody why you think that, though. I'm totally on board, by the way. But I love just thinking. I love hearing your thoughts on just how everyone's overpaying Miami Dolphins.
I look at free agency and I think fans have always criticized the Steelers, saying, "Well, I wish they would do more in free agency." Even when they've had the space and. We got spoiled last year when they saw the splash signings with guys like Steven Nelson and Mark Barron and whatnot. But I think in reality, you look at the grand scheme of the Steelers' operation has always been to get guys in the draft that they like, develop them, cultivate them as players, and get them to stay in house. If they don't like them, they let them walk. They do like them, they find a way to get a deal done. I mean, even with guys like Le'Veon Bell, they wanted to keep Bell and they did what they could do to keep him. And obviously, he decided to go for greener pastures. You see these teams that go and they throw the brakes truck at all of these players, and so often we see these guys sign these big lucrative contracts with high guarantees, and then they don't perform for their team. Then that team is trying to figure out a way to get rid of them. They're trying to find trade partners for someone that will take on their bloated contract. A lot of these dudes hit free agency. Some hit because, they're looking for a different situation. They didn't like with the team they were on or whatever. But so many of them get let on free agency because they want money that the team is not willing to pay them. Why is the team not willing to pay them? Probably because of the fact there's something they didn't see there. You see these guys who always resets the market. The guys that always reset the market are the guys that are leaving their old team to find the new team because the old team didn't want to make them the highest paid player at their position. Then they go and they get that money from the next team. And we're talking about a guy who's just eating up their contract. And why is this team not having a success? Well, they don't have enough money to get guys they need because player X is eating up all this cash. I'll never have an issue. As much as people want to have the Steelers go and be big spenders in free agency, I'll never have the issue of them not being big spenders. I'd always rather draft guys, keep them in-house, sign them the contract extensions when I get to that point, like Cam Hayward, Marquise Pouncey, David DeCastro. Those are guys you're not always going to find on the free agent market. And from time to time, you come across a guy like Joe Hayden who just kind of fell out of favor with his old team. He could still play. He just needed a new environment, and the Browns were a dumpster fire at that point, more than they are now. So I think realistically that was a unique situation where a guy gets cut very late in the process and the team comes in at the 11th hour and swoops him up, and obviously he still had productive years left. But you don't see that very often. There's always exceptions. Guys like Zadarius Smith, like you mentioned, goes to Green Bay, has a very productive year. But I also trust the Packers organization. A lot of these teams that throw money, like the Dolphins, like the Browns, teams like that, where they're throwing money left and right, I don't trust them to make the right decision. And that's just, I know it's a groundbreaking thought that the Browns wouldn't make a necessarily good decision. I think Austin Hooper's a fine tight end. I wouldn't be comfortable making him the highest paid tight end in the league history or whatever. That's just not my way of doing business. I think you can find tight ends a lot cheaper elsewhere. They're going to fit what you try to do, or find one in the draft to put with Njoku. I don't think you need to do that while you have, really no safeties on your roster that other than Sheldrick Redwine that have any experience at all. So, but I'm not the GM of that team. I can't make that decision. But
yeah,
that's my point with it. I can't get on board with it, and I'll always think it's stupid.
Well, it's the other thing too is, these guys talking about, I don't know what the heck's going on with Cincinnati. Maybe people just don't want to go there. But you talk about Cleveland. Talk about their linebackers too. Kirksey and Schobert, and Kirksey just was signing with someone else too. So, but the Ravens are making some moves. They have the money because they have these quarterbacks, these first-round quarterbacks that are under rookie deals. So they have like this plethora of cash that they're sitting on, and that's going to go away for Cleveland very quickly because they got a lot of guys. They had a lot of first-round picks, a lot of high draft picks, and they're going to be coveted, like a Myles Garrett or a Denzel Ward and Baker Mayfield. They're going to have to pay all these guys. Nick Chubb was a second rounder, so they don't even get a fifth-year option to try and kick that can down the street like the Steelers will be able to with like Minka. And that's where the Steelers have been real smart with their moves, real what do you want to say, frugal in certain ways. The Minka trade was fantastic. The Devin Bush move last year was also very smart in some ways. And that these addressed needs, and they got guys that are under rookie contracts in areas of need that are probably playing above what normal first or even second year players or what we're accustomed to seeing. You know what I mean? So. Not only that, guys like Vance McDonald, or as much as you want to rip on him, if you saw his little Twitter rant yesterday, he's absolutely right. He's not wrong. Ryan Switzer, they make these kind of moves, and they're mid or late round draft picks where guys may or may not end up making it out of camp, making it to the roster, practice squad, whatever, to get some guys that have some NFL experience or unwanted from other teams that have favorable contracts. Joe Hayden, another example where other teams had already gone through the free agent process. If Joe Hayden was released in March, I don't know that he would be a Pittsburgh Steeler. There would have been some ridiculous money thrown at him by one of these other teams, but since teams had already invested in blew the money that was burning a hole in their pocket, the Steelers were able to swoop in there and make a nice little deal. And it also has to deal with the player too. The player was used to, somebody like Hayden is used to playing at Pittsburgh, playing against Pittsburgh, familiarity of opponents. We see a lot of lateral movement there. Same thing with the Giants or the Redskins. Redskins or the Cowboys and things of that nature too. So, I think we've talked about that on here before. If not, like just look at it. Just look at free agency. You get a lot of guys that move between their own divisions sometimes because of familiarity of opponents and seeing those guys on film, seeing those guys on the field and playing against them. So that type of stuff happens. But that's where the Steelers are kind of more active in that aspect now. In order to do some of the things that they've done, they've had to say goodbye to a few guys. We had the retirement of Ramon Foster yesterday. There was a rumor that leaked somewhere, true or false, I don't know, that they may have been shopping him. They may have been looking to trade him and get something. I don't know. But kudos to Ramon for, I think Ramon knew that writing was going to be on the wall. 1 year left on his contract. If he was hanging around for another year or not, who knows? But he hung around long enough to be the team's rep with all these union negotiations, collective bargaining and everything. So, hats off to him for doing all that, being an intelligent, smart guy who gets to walk away with his head up, with his health, etc., money in his pocket, everything like that. So that's really good, but it's going to leave one hole that the Steelers are probably already looking to address, and we'll talk about offensive line like we have in the past. But some of the other positions, where they let some guys walk free. Anthony Chickillo, I think that was the one that was like the no-brainer, the surefire one that was definitely going to happen. I know Brian's laughing. He had a very rich contract. That's not to say he couldn't be signed and brought back for less if he were willing to accept less. It's always a two-way street there. But I think, I think they have enough guys in the outside linebacker rotation, at least to now with Bud tagged. You got your starters out of the way. I think you got some guys you could develop behind Bud and TJ Watt. So, there's not a whole lot of major concern there, I don't think, at least with the edge guys, because I'll ask Zach about the other linebackers, your interior linebackers, because I know he's got a guy, he's really psyched up. He's over there. He's just biting his tongue waiting to talk about him. And we'll have to talk about Dirty Red's contract too, right? Free agency is stupid. But Brian, I look at, what they lost. I know you're a big Ragu fan, and I guess we'll talk about that, and we could talk about Chickillo. I think that as long as you got some of these restricted free agent guys that are brought back in the fold, maybe losing I don't know what to think about losing Foster, to be completely honest. It's definitely a hole that they're going to have to fill. I don't know the BJ Finney. He's an unrestricted free agent. I don't think they have the cash or anything to be able to bring him back. It would be nice if they did, but they're going to have to do some maneuvering on the offensive line like we said before.
Yeah, look, I think, Ramon Foster's loss is going to be felt more in the locker room. I think they've got guys who can step in and adequately play to cover him, and they have in the past when he's been injured. I think, but you can't overstate the leadership aspect of it. You can't overstate the fact that he's the guy that passes a lot of communication sometimes back and forth down the line. He's the one that always turns around and look to the quarterback and does things. There's pieces to the puzzle that will need to change, but I think they'll be all right. You've got guys like Matt Filer who could move inside to guard if need be. You've got room at tackle with Chuks Okor for whatever names I can't say, so there, and then you also have Zach Banner. If Finney stays, I think that's great. Again, I don't know that that's going to be feasible. He's certainly earned a starter's payday with what he's been able to do in his time in Pittsburgh. And a lot of times that means you got to go elsewhere. But there is, you do now have an open slot. They're going to, I'm sure, try and sign whoever they can sign. But, there's some restrictions and they still are going to be limited by what they can do under the cap. The cap did not go up as much as they had hoped it would, even with the CBA. Next year, if it was next year, it'd be a different story. But this year, it's, they have a little less capital to work with, and we'll have to see how they can finagle it. And again, it leads me down the road of thinking, a high round draft pick is likely to go on to the offensive line if it's there.
I have no problems with that. I'm sure Zach has no problem with that either. Well, I'm going to throw you I'll throw you a few bones here because we had some news that just came in. The Jaguars are signing Schobert, so he's going to be off the market too. 5 years, almost $54 million. Woo! That team just cleared a whole ton of cap space to go below their wad on Joe Schobert. I mean, geez, that's just between him and Kirksey and, the Browns aren't retaining their own guys as it is. They might have all this cap space, but it's like, well, regime change, so we're just going to clean the house with this. It'll be interesting to see how that all works out. But, Tyler Matakevich got like 2 years, $9 million, and I'm just like, this is just basically kind of like a guy who primarily plays special teams, but that's not what we're really worried about. I was surprised about the Mark Barron thing. We'll see if I'm proven wrong. We'll see if he signs anywhere or ends up coming back or whatever. He played an awful lot. He did have a rich contract. Maybe his people got with, the Steelers people, and they didn't want to do any type of extension, kick the money around, whatever be the case. And it was just like, well, okay, well, we have no choice but to make this move. But Zach, you've been pretty adamant on, they're losing 2 inside linebackers out of what they had on the depth chart last year. Ryan Shazier who is now on the retired/reserve list also, whatever, that's supposed to mean. I think it's pretty much, I think it's a given he's never going to come back, and Father Time will catch up even if he did. Nobody really wants to actually see him play again. I think we'd all be terrified to see him on the field again. But ever since that, there's been this long shadow cast, and, with Devin Bush and Mark Barron in there last year, that kind of went away. Now you don't have Barron. You have Vince Williams. You have Devin Bush. What do you think the Steelers are thinking here? Because, this could be, I'd be rather terrified of the idea of one of these guys going down, or, there's always the deal where Vince was rotating in and out. We know he's a thumper as far as being a blitzer and more of a run stopper than a coverage guy.
Yeah, I mean, short answer, they're going to add somebody, either via the draft or some cheap guy in free agency now, like we see in like 2-3 weeks after this major wave kind of comes through, or someone that we see during camp, or after the first wave of, or the wave of roster cuts get made in August, and we'll get a feel for it then, August, September, so I think that'll be a real possibility. But I don't see them putting a huge thing on it, because I firmly believe that they're high on Ulysses Gilbert III. I was high on him coming in. He was one of the few guys that I was consistently connecting to the Steelers. He wanted to be here. The Steelers were very adamant about his MAC connection and what he offers. I think his small school stature is kind of what got him to fall to the 6th round like he did, but I think he's a much better talent. He completely showed out during the preseason last year, and then before he landed on IR this past season, he was a special team standout. Honestly, I thought he was in a position where he was outproducing Tyler Matakevich, who had been the special team standout for so long. And with Rosie Nix being as banged up as he was, Grant Gilbert was really the guy that everyone was noticing on special teams. And I think that kind of got him in there, and the Steelers were excited about that. And they were excited about his production and splash plays in the preseason. I think there's enough there that we saw that this is a guy that potentially can come in there and not start, but I think, get an opportunity to at least contribute in some capacity on passing downs to kind of fill that role that Mark Barron did, if he can handle it mentally, which he is a smart player. The athletic traits are there. He's a bigger guy than Devin Bush is, but he's not as heavy-footed as Vince Williams can be. I think he gives you a nice blend of an all-around package at linebacker, as long as he can handle the diagnosing aspect of being a middle linebacker in that defense where you're going to be forced to make calls from times. You're going to have to see things developing ahead of you. Are you trusting what you're seeing and trusting your feet and abilities and coverage? There's a lot of things that play there, and I think if he can do that, I think the Steelers have confidence that he can do that. I think he is the person that no one's talking about, that middle linebacker, now that Matakevich and Barron are both out of the picture, at least for the time being for Barron, if not permanently. I think he's a guy that will be the number 3 linebacker next year and have a chance to get some serious playing time on defense, regardless if they bring in a new body via the draft or via free agency. I just don't think they have enough draft capital right now to be using a pick on a middle linebacker who's going to start the season out probably no better at most than their 3rd middle linebacker, and realistically probably their 4th. And Robert Spillane's another guy who did well in the preseason. He's more of a thumper, downhill guy like Vince Williams, but he didn't do badly, and the team's kept him around for a period of time this past year. So they have options. It's just that the depth is not as sufficient as it was last year when you had 3 quality guys that you could play there. Fans can argue about Barrett not being quality until they're blue in the face, but he still was a guy that is he's a contributor on a defense in the NFL. I mean, that's the only way you can really look at it. So I'll be interested to see it, but my point of advice is to not sleep on Gilbert. I think he's the guy that can come in there and no one's talking about that they should be, because I think he's in store for a big year too for the Steelers.
Yeah, and, I just wanted to go back to Barron and some of the things, Chickalo, we didn't really mention a whole lot, but there's, we'll see what happens to our skipper. Here was a guy that wasn't even playing special teams until the fourth preseason game. And, for all intents and purposes, made the 53-man, but was like almost immediately cut for another roster move. And, kind of bounced around, came back. We'll see. I know a lot of people have their preseason favorites. So Ola has been one for a little while. They've been trying to develop. So we'll see what else happens with the outside guys, the inside guys. Obviously, Chickalo, that move was done because it saved them $5 million in cap space. Barron was done with $5.25 million. Vince Williams, his cap number goes up to $7 million this year. Over the next two seasons, 2020 and 2021, just a little over when you take into effect any type of bonuses, prorated bonuses. So that is up from 3.8 last year and 3.2 the year before. I don't think they saw themselves in a position where they wanted to be paying like three linebackers in the ballpark of like $8 million or so, because even Devin Bush on a rookie contract, let me see, where's he at? He's somewhere in here. Let's see, 18 over 4, is that what it is? So, he was at 3.4 last year, 4.2 for this year, and then goes to 5.1 and $6 million because, he was a higher round draft pick, but he was almost making more than Vince, you know what I mean, last year. So I think obviously this was a bit more of a business move. Sometimes you would like to keep people that you like for whatever reason, that can't always happen. And I thought an interesting one too was they just released Johnny Holton out of the blue too. I didn't think he was costing them anything. I don't think he really gave much of savings. I'm not really sure what that was all about, other than maybe just creating even creating a roster spot, really. I don't know. That was a little bizarre to me, but otherwise, let me see. These were all the moves. Chickalo released, Mark Barron released, Johnny Holton released, Ramon Foster retired, and they have, Ryan Shazier essentially earmarked as retired or put on the retired list. That's about all the more that the formal announcement was yet. We'll see if he comes out in a few days, has a speech or something like that, and just says, his efforts towards returning to professional football are maybe permanently on hold or something. I don't know. I'm not sure where that is, but I know they like to still maybe keep him involved with the team and, help this guy maybe still earn a paycheck or something doing whatever he may end up doing. Maybe he'll be involved with Steelers.com like, Tunch or Craig Wolfley or something like that. I don't know. We'll end up seeing. Maybe he'll be like a consultant or a coach or who knows. I'm just kind of spitballing there. So, we're talking about what else can they do in free agency? What else will they look to do in free agency? We talked about the restricted free agents just a little bit there. So there was Mike Hilton. I think, who do you think's the next highest priority, guys? Brian, I think it's Mike Hilton, right?
Yeah, I would kind of go with that. I think, they like Mike Hilton. It just depends on how far apart they are. But yeah, I think he's probably the next priority in keeping that defense locked up. He's played well enough at that nickel slot that there's no reason not to think that's going to be the guy they try and target.
Yeah, and I agree too. I think they'll try and do what they need to do to keep some of that offensive line together and not drastically change it. Zach, I'm sure you're chomping at the bit to talk about that too.
Yeah, I agree that you want to keep that defense together, but the way I think about it is you have a guy like Cam Sutton who can at least come in there and replace you if you can. I mean, obviously, I'd like to see Mike Hilton stay here, and any opportunity I have to get him here for next year and then beyond, I'd be happy with it. But I just think about the fact you just now confirmed you're losing Ramon Foster. BJ Finney is still completely up in the air, and you're going to I don't like the idea of letting Matt Filer also go. I mean, I think Matt Filer would be better suited at guard anyway, but you can't afford to lose two starters in one offseason on the line that's been as consistent as they are, especially knowing the fact that there's a chance that Alejandro Villanueva very well might be out on the way out next offseason, depending on what his contract situation turns in if they ever extend him. So in my mind, I think you have to find a way to keep Filer, even though they're going to be almost a guaranteed thing where they're going to sign or draft a guy in the draft at offensive line. I just think you have to find a way to keep Filer and then at least keep some consistency on that offensive line, especially as Ben's coming back next year. Whether that means Filer is going to be a left guard or continuing to play a right tackle, you got to do something there. It's a tough call, because Mike Hilton's been a standout as that nickel corner. But I like the idea of keeping the offensive line intact as much as you can while infusing some young talent via the draft as you look forward ahead beyond 2020.
I can't disagree with any of that. So I'm just looking up and down here to make sure we didn't miss anything else that may be some aggressive needs or anything like that. Obviously tight end. So some whack job will come up and say something about safety and Terrell Edmonds. Just let it go. Let it go, okay? The guy, he tackles, okay? Okay, he gave up what? Like maybe a big play, 2 or 3. I always go back to would you prefer, back in the days of Will Allen, Shamarko Thomas, or even, Mike Mitchell or whatever combination you had there, whether Troy was still there or not, or older Troy, So that just drives me bonkers. And it's like he's under a rookie deal. Nobody's going to trade. It was the same thing. It was like tag and trade Bud Dupree. You're not getting 2 first-round draft picks. You're not getting 2 second-round draft picks. That type of stuff isn't happening. For somebody to take on a large contract and give up draft capital, come on, guys. I mean, although I will say you could get a little more than Bill O'Brien got for DeAndre Hopkins. So, there's 2 ends of the spectrum. It was like, here, we're gonna give this guy away, not even for Cracker Jacks or the box, just the prize that's inside. And then you got, then you got Stephon Diggs, who goes to Buffalo, and they just sold the factory that they make the Cracker Jacks in for him. I mean, it's unbelievable. But I was laughing because I'm still looking at this. It's like this never changes, does it? The ESPN tweeted out something that the Browns' offense is stacked with talent, and this flushed emoji that's just kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And I was like, these are the same guys from last year, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham, Baker Mayfield, Nick Chubb, and they added Austin Hooper and paid him the richest contract in the league. Yeah, that's got my seal of approval, guys. I guess Njoku, you just flip him out of there, and Hooper's, I don't know. I mean, I liked Hooper down in Atlanta, but I just never thought to me that he would ever get this crazy contract. And when people were talking about cutting Vance McDonald and all this and that, it was like, okay, you save maybe $4 million. Jesse James is making almost as much money as Vance is. And you look at some of these other guys like Tyler Kroft at Buffalo, and I'm trying to think who else it was. Maybe it was like a Darren Fells or somebody like that. Guys that are making infinitely much more money. And Eric Ebron and Jack Doyle both in Indianapolis. And it's just, what are you going to do with this? You're not going to find another comparable starter. And it makes me wonder what Nick Vanette's market's going to be like. So, I guess no news is good news at this point, as far as maybe hoping you could bring him back. But in my priority list, man, we've already talked about the restricted guys, and I would even put B.J. Finney just above that, because nothing against Nick Vanette. I like him as a player. I'd love to see him return. But if he's going to command some major dollars, I don't know that the Steelers run enough 2 tight end sets to merit just not going forward with Zach Gentry as a developmental guy, Christian Scotland Williamson, if they think he could at least be a blocking style tight end, because we saw in the preseason in camp that the transition from rugby and catching the football a little difficult still, but still a very intelligent guy too, and very physical and a large human being, the type of guy that Mike Tomlin covets. You know what I mean? Athleticism and size and pedigree, as we all talk about. So that's kind of where I'm at in the whole pecking order here. Or maybe they could even draft a tight end, even though I know it's not like you guys did the whole draft thing. I'm going to ask you this. We all know they're probably going to look at a wide receiver, but pretty much we talked about the top priorities maybe being offensive line, maybe even double dip there. Not like the Steelers have a first-round draft pick, not like they have a whole lot of draft capital. They do have a comp pick in the 3rd round, but they don't have 2 third-rounders either. So, what's the next thing here? You think I don't know that they could find like a really, what do you want to say, cost-effective tight end in free agency that's going to fit the bill of unless they somehow get Nick Vanette to come back. I think they'll be looking maybe in the draft to add somebody, or they'll wait until there's cuts or something, a la the end of preseason, and maybe add somebody that comes off of waivers or something of that nature. Zach, I'll ask you, my friend, first, and then Brian, since Brian didn't just interject there.
I think realistically, they're in a position where you have 6 draft picks as it sits right now. It's not a whole lot of wiggle room to kind of do it, and you kind of have to prioritize where you really think. I mean, I still think they are in a position to go best player available. I think they're going to look to get the guys that can come in there and really help their roster out as opposed to reaching for a need. And the years that they've done that, they've had the best success of getting guys that actually can come in and help there. The years that they haven't done that and they've reached for need, we've seen players fizzle out and not exactly develop the way we want them to. I really think that they're going to go offensive line early, and it might be the second round, might be the third round. I think there's plenty of guys that are there early at that point that you can go after that would be worthwhile for you, either tackle or at the interior on the interior offensive line. I'm still not huge on this tight end class. I haven't been. I'm not going to be. I think there's guys in there that are interesting prospects you can take, but I think you have to find a way to keep Vannett if Vannett's willing to stay around on a $1 to $2 million deal. Take him, because like that, you're not going to get a cheaper number two who's going to provide you what Vannett was able to last year. At least give you the insurance that if McDonald does get hurt again, you have a guy that you can at least trust as a veteran to go in there and get the job done. And who knows, maybe he'll grow a rapport because he hasn't played with Ben yet. There's a very good chance that Vannett and Ben have good chemistry. You have no idea. But I don't think you're going to. I'm not one to dabble in the tight end free agent market. Say what you want to, and what I've said about free agency, I feel like tight end contracts are some of the worst contracts you see in free agency. And I'm not trying to get involved in that bidding war, especially when you see guys like Austin Hooper, who is a very good tight end. I would say he's a top 5 tight end in the league. I'm not paying him $11 million a year. Especially on a team where Baker needs a check down valve, but I don't see him being any more involved in that offense than Njoku was. And for me, that's not $11 million worth. And I don't think there's a lot of guys out there that are going to provide you any type of upgrade over a guy like Vannett or McDonald that are going to be any more cheap than they are. So I'm if you're going to go tight end, get one in the draft, I guess. I don't know which one, whatever flavor you want. They're all receivers and a couple can block, and you can say what you want to about some of them, but I think that's a position if you're going to go the draft. But offensive line, edge, defensive back, receiver, those are all positions I think they're going to be able to get somebody in the draft to fill it as opposed to overspending in free agency. But I do think they're going to sign someone in free agency. I think they're going to sign somebody that we're not going to expect them to do, and it's going to be a little bit more of a veteran type of dude to kind of fill a hole someplace. Because if you can check off boxes in free agency with veteran guys or depth pieces, it kind of takes the pressure off you for reaching for certain positions in the draft. So when you only have 6 picks and only 2 of them are in the top 100, you're kind of playing, or one of them's in the top 100, you're kind of playing with fire. I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of just go in that direction and see what happens and how the chips fall.
Well, Brian, let's go with the rest of the free agent stuff. Malcolm Jenkins now is going to become a free agent, so start that noise while we're at it.
Yeah. Look, I love Malcolm Jenkins. He's from the Ohio State University,
yes.
So but we're not going to pay him the money that he may or may not be able to get. And I just want to concur with what Zach said. I'd love to keep Nick Vannett for the right price. I'm not paying him, the kind of money the Lions decided to pay Jesse James last year. How well that worked out for them. I echo the concept that free agency is stupid because teams are stupid when it comes to it. The shiny toy syndrome occurs, and they've got money in their pockets that they just got to spend, and they don't spend it well almost 90% of the time. So. And maybe even higher. I just think I don't want anything to do with tight end free agency. I'm also concurring with the professor that I'm not in love with this tight end draft. I've stated my preference that if they're going to get somebody, I'd rather it was Thaddeus Moss and they do it later. But if they, we just have to see how the board falls. For the rest of free agency, man, look, what can you expect? Not much, man.
There's only one thing I really want, and it has nothing to do with the Steelers. It has to deal with, the landing spot for Tom Brady, I guess. Not going to be. He's ending it with the Patriots, and I'll end with this. This was said by Vince Williams. He said just it might have been yesterday. I'm just going to say it. Tom Brady got to take his ass to the NFC, man. Year 8, and I'm sick of it. So come on, Bruce Arians, you got to do us a solid here and get him to Tampa Bay because I don't want to see him with the Chargers.
I'm with you 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Get him out of the daggone AFC.
And I guess we'll find out if Bill Belichick is really a great coach. I think if all the rumors suffice and they get Andy Dalton, we're going to really find out, and we're going to find out if Tom Brady's a system quarterback or not as well, depending on where he goes. I'll tell you what, the Chargers would be. I don't like the talent that they have on that team, so keep him away from there. Although, you know what, Father Time could also catch up too. We'll see. How great he is. You know what I mean? The greats still tend to be great. Maybe he squeezes another couple years out and whatever else. So, just get him out of the AFC. Let's get New England out of the way, and maybe Buffalo can help with that a little bit too as they start to stack their roster. And these teams see the window now for winning when these quarterbacks are in like their first 4 or 5 years. So that's what you're dealing with anybody who's making these moves. And including the teams that have moves yet to make, such as maybe Miami or Cincinnati too. So, guys, thanks once again for joining me today. I know it's a little bit of chaos with the three of us, and everyone's in isolation and starting to go, rabid or whatever, foaming at the mouth, trying to find something to do. So, I imagine we'll have more news coming in the next few days. Maybe not as hot and heavy as it has been, right, Bri?
Yeah, maybe not. We'll see. I don't think it's going to be like I said. I think the haters who hate the Steelers not being involved in free agency heavily are going to lap up this year because they're not going to be. So yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see the Tom Brady thing play out. But beyond that, I think the majority of what was going to be done is done.
Yeah, I agree. And likewise, Zach, thanks for taking some time out of your still busy schedule as usual and providing some of the listeners out there with your unique insights.
No problem. The only thing I can sit here and say is when I always talk about free agency, I'm always happy for the players maximizing their value. I'll always question the teams. I'm going to leave it at that.
Oh, yeah. I'm not mad at the players for getting what they get. I mean, even saying something like Schobert or anybody like, get what you can get, make hay while the making's good. You know what I mean? So get everything you can. I'm all for that side of it too. It's it's a give and take. So, and if you could take it. But don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, folks. My name's Joe. Their names are Brian and Zach. They totally missed the Three Stooges references earlier, but I'm sure you didn't, and I'm sure you're thinking it right now after hearing us. So we appreciate you tuning in, and until next time, we encourage everyone out there, by all means, wash your hands, cover your coughs, be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.